Hello and welcome to the sixth and final module of our course on intermediate macroeconomics. This module is going to be devoted to the cash in advance model. We're going to be using the cash in advance model to get a better sense of how inflation affects the decisions of people and how it can be detrimental for the economy. Let's first do a quick outline of what we're going to say here. So first we're going to start with some context, and that's actually going to be included in this first video, where we're gonna talk about why inflation is gonna matter, and we're gonna delve into exactly where money demand comes from and how we're gonna model that money demand in our cash in advance economy. Then, and this is gonna be the bulk of the videos that we're gonna have, we're gonna be delving into what's the cash in advance model, what are its components, and particularly how we're going to pass from nominal to real variables in order to be able to pose the equilibrium in a way that we can solve. Then we're going to have a next set of videos that is all going to be about finding the equilibrium conditions, finding the equilibrium allocation of real and nominal variables in the model. This is going to be where we're going to see how changing the rate of growth of money, it's going to change inflation, and that's going to end up having effects on how people behave. Then the final thing we're going to do in this module is we're going to talk about the optimal level of inflation. If inflation is distorting the behavior of people, then the government can decide what the level of inflation is by changing its monetary policy. And then you could ask, what is the optimal level of inflation and what's the monetary policy that achieves that level? So, to some context. First, we want to focus on the role of inflation, but before we get there, in the previous module, we were asking what is money and how can we add it to the model? And so we said that money's key feature is that it facilitated transactions. But then when we went and solved the model, we found that the model showcased what we call the classical dichotomy. We can solve separately for real and nominal variables, and thus we had money neutrality. So the level of money had no effect on the behavior of agents. The real output, real consumption, wages, labor, all of that unaffected by the level of money. So the level of money was able to change prices, but nothing else. What we're gonna see now is that first, we do not think money is neutral in the real world because we do not think that prices are entirely flexible. But that's something we already mentioned in the previous module. There is a more interesting thing to do, and this is going to be what we're going to do in this module, and is to think even if money is neutral, that doesn't mean that the government can do anything it wants with the money supply, because money can affect the dynamics of the model, and that's the key here. It's not about the static equilibrium of the model, it's about the dynamics, how you go from one period to the next. That's because inflation affects the value of money over time. And so the level of money might not matter, but its growth rate might. Because the growth rate of money, it's going to be deeply related to the level of inflation. And if inflation is nocive for the economy, then we're going to be able to draw conclusions about how much should we have the money supply grow. So that's going to be kind of the context of where we're going with this. Now, the key for modeling it is to go back to money demand. As we said in the previous slide, the key is to determine what do we use money for. We need to know what money is used for in order to know what it's going to affect. So in the previous module, we developed a very simple model of money demand, and we said that money demand had certain properties, mostly that it was going to be proportional to the demand for real liquidity, so P times real liquidity, and we knew that real liquidity depended positively on the number of transactions you want to make, that's the Y, and negatively on the nominal interest rate. In this module, instead of having this more abstract view, we're going to explicitly incorporate the transaction motive for having money. So in this model, agents keep money because they needed to make transactions. That's the reason agents hold money in the model. And we're going to call that a cash in advance constraint. Very literally, we're going to impose a new constraint on the behavior of agents that says, If you want to buy something, you need to have cash or liquid assets that are going to let you buy it. Basically, you can think of this as a model where they pay you at the end of the month. And so, unless you have cash that you've saved from the past, you cannot buy anything until you get paid. That's basically the world we're modeling here, and that's going to be the cash in advance constraint. So moving cash between periods, it's going to make agents vulnerable to inflation because what you can spend today in consumption goods, it's going to depend on how much money you saved yesterday. But then the value of that money, as we saw in the previous module, it's going to be given by the 1 over 1 plus the inflation rate. That's because as prices grow, the value of money, it's going to go down. So that's kind of the context we need in order to start with this. What we're going to do in the next videos is take a look at exactly how we're going to model this cash in advance constraint and how it's going to affect consumers.